welcome Sylvain Bintein from the European Commission, DG Environment, to have his presentation on the European Union and the member states kind of approach and standpoints around the plastic treaty. So Dr. Bintein is overseeing legislation for chemicals in REACH and also the classification, labeling and packaging as a team leader at the DG Environment. So welcome very much. We are particularly glad to have someone from the policy side joining us here, as FRAM is mainly an academic center here. So welcome.
Thanks. So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for giving me the possibility to present our priorities and what we are trying to negotiate on for this treaty. Thanks a lot for Bethanie for all your explanation, and thank again for the very good input, scientific input that you provide during the negotiation, because it's really needed. The negotiations are very, very difficult. We are in front of some opposition, in particular for the country producing petrol, that they don't want to see any treaty dealing with reduction of production of plastic or chemical of concern in plastic. They believe that with the good waste management, we will solve the plastic issue. So we are almost at the end of the negotiation. So we still have one INC, so Intergovernmental Negotiation Committee, to find a compromise text that we hope that will be very ambitious. So this is our wish, to have a very ambitious and legally binding text with very clear criteria and scientifically based criteria. So it's why we believe that the input from the scientific coalition, but also from, more generally speaking, from scientific colleagues, it's primordial, it's very important. So I was saying that indeed we want to have a very ambitious legally binding instrument with very clear scientific criteria. And one of our objectives, before moving to the three aspects that I will present in more detail, we really would like to have a reduction target for the production of primary polymer. And this is it will be quite difficult. And we want also to ensure that the treaty covers all the life cycle of plastic products. So there are two elements that are crucial for us. But as I said, I will focus on three main aspects. The first one is about the chemical of concern in plastic and plastic product, like all the additives that are present in this plastic product. Then the problematic plastic product, and then the product design. So you can move to the next slide, because I will then move to the chemical of concern. So the chemical of concern is a key element for the EU in the negotiations. We believe that it's clearly in the mandate of what we have to do in the treaty. So we are developing an approach that we would like to present. So chemical of concern is the one that are present in plastic product because we need them. For example, a plasticizer, the flame retardant for the plastic product. But some of them are very problematic. So they can create human health and environmental issue during the use of the plastic product. They can also create some problem during the production of the plastic product for workers. And as explained before by Bethanie, the presence of problematic chemical in plastic product can create problem at the recycling stage, because then you have not a very clean materials to create new objects that will be contaminated with legacy chemical in plastic. So we are proposing a three-step approach for listing chemical of concern in the plastic treaty. And the first step, it's via a nomination by a party to base the listing on hazardous property of the chemical of concern. And this assessment of the hazardous property that should be included in the nomination dossier by a party will be done by a scientific committee. So again, science is quite present in our proposal, and we hope it will be present in the treaty as well. And the idea is that if the committee confirms that the substance fulfills the criteria that I will show after what could be the criteria, then the substance will be listed in Annex A of the treaty. And this will trigger some obligation. For example, so for obligation for industry to minimize the emission of that substance during the production of a product, a plastic product, but also during the life cycle of the plastic product. It will push also industry to substitute that very specific substance listed. We also hope that it will be linked, this listing, to obligatory action, in particular to help traceability and transparency of the chemical in plastic product. So this is the added value of having the first step with some legal obligation linked to the listing. The second step is that if the substance indeed fulfills the criteria, then it will be subject to a risk assessment to identify if indeed the presence of that chemical in the product can induce a risk to human health or the environment, but also to risk management analysis and also to socioeconomic consideration, including assessment of alternative. So this assessment, quite an in-depth assessment, will be done again by the scientific committee. And then that scientific committee will provide a recommendation to the conference of party. And that recommendation could include a total ban of a substance in all plastic product, could be to restrict the use of a specific substance in some plastic product, so not in all plastic product, but only in some. And also one option could be also to have no specific action because, for example, there is no risk that have been demonstrated. Based on this recommendation by the scientific committee, the COP will decide if indeed we need to implement restrictive measures for substance in some or in all plastic product. We want to give the possibility to have a specific exemption due for specific or national circumstances. So this is quite an important element because it is quite obvious with the dialogue that we had with some party that for them to have this flexibility, perhaps to have more time to implement a restriction at national level, this flexibility is more than welcome. So perhaps it's one of the things that we have to include to ensure perhaps an agreement at ANC 5. Next slide. So with regard to the criteria that we would like to propose, so it's mainly the one that are developed at UNGHS, so a global treaty on classification and labeling that has been implemented in the EU, but also worldwide. So for the human health, we believe that the substances that are carcinogenic, mutagenic, or toxic for production, category 1, would be the substance that we consider a substance of concern in plastic product. And for the environment, the one that are persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic, or very persistent and very bioaccumulative, could be also subject to be identified as chemical of concern under the treaty. And to ensure that other hazard classes could be considered as well, we would like to include a kind of a safety net, what we call equivalent level of concern to CMRs and PBT. And this is mainly to ensure that, for example, substances that are endocrine disruptors or respiratory sensitizer could also be subject to the treaty. For what we call specific target organ toxicity, we believe that substances like immunotoxic or neurotoxic substances are also a priority for listing in that treaty. There is a new hazard classes that is not so yet well known. It has been very recently introduced in CLP in the EU. And the substances are very persistent, very mobile, or mobile, persistent, and toxic. And this mobility gives them the possibility to contaminate water resource, groundwater, but also river and sea. So it's quite an important class of substance that we also believe should be part of the treaty. Next slide. On top of having a very clear procedure of adding substance in the treaty, we would like to propose an initial list of substances of concern, mainly the one for which at the EU we already took some very strict measures. So we have some phthalate, for example. We have some organophosphate flame retardant, some UV filters. We have obviously the bisphenol A that we would like to tackle in this treaty, and also some metallic compounds. And these metallic compounds, cadmium and lead compounds, are quite useful for us to demonstrate that we need to act on top of existing multilateral environmental acts like Stockholm Convention or Basel, because, for example, in Stockholm Convention is limited to persistent organic pollutants. So metallic compounds are not part of POPs. So it's why we believe that this action on chemicals in the plastic treaty will complement the existing agreement related to chemicals, so Stockholm, Rotterdam, Basel, and Minamata, for example. Next slide. So it was first the chemical part. Now I would like to introduce what we want to do for the problematic and avoidable plastic product. We have more or less the same two-step approach. The only difference here is that the first step does not lead to a legally binding action compared to the chemical one. So most probably very same scientific committee will assess if a product is problematic and avoidable. Like for chemicals, a party will develop a dossier demonstrating that the substance is problematic and avoidable. And therefore, if so, then the product will be listed in the treaty. So the procedure is the following that you can see on the slide. So nomination by a party, and then the scientific committee will assess if indeed the substance is problematic, in particular if the product disrupts circularity or if it has a negative impact on the environment. If the product is assessed to be problematic, then we can move to the next step and look at avoidability. And then depending on if the product is avoidable or not, we have different measures. If it's avoidable, then we go for restrictive measures to eliminate as soon as possible that product in the market, with again some possibility for exemption. And if we cannot avoid that specific product, we believe that we can try to implement some measure to reduce the production, but also to improve the design. And then I will come back on the design approach to minimize the concern that we can have on that specific product for the environment or for the circularity issues. Next slide. So this is a possible criteria that can be used by the scientific committee to identify a plastic product as problematic. So we have two types of criteria. The one related that the product has negative impact on the environment, and the second one is that the product disrupts circularity. So in particular, recyclability. So for the negative impact on the environment, the first one is about the microplastic issue. Second one is about the product can create animal entanglement. Third one is about the product can be ingested by animal and organisms. Fourth one is the product has a high likelihood to be littered. And then we move to in between criteria that the product is single-use or short-life product. And then related to circularity, the product is not reusable, recyclable in practice at a scale. The product disrupts the ability of others to be recycled, and the product negatively affects the quality or safety of the end product of the recycling process. So these criteria are non-cumulative. So if a product fulfills one of the criteria, it will be seen as problematic. Obviously, we have some possible other criteria, but this is the one that we would like to propose during the negotiation. And what I'm seeing on chemical and problematic product, it's mainly based on all the acquis that we have at the EU. In the EU, we have a very ambitious chemicals regulation, but also very ambitious legislation on plastic. So we have some experience that we believe we can use to provide the best approach at the global level. There are still some issues that we are not yet sure it should be done, like traceability. But we hope that in the coming years, we will find some solution, in particular for traceability of chemical and plastic product. Next slide. Next slide is about the criteria to identify avoidability of problematic product. And this is mainly based on different type of alternative, plastic alternative or non-plastic substitute, alternative practice, and so on. So this is the criteria. Plus additional one that can be developed that we would like to propose to assess the avoidability of a problematic product. And the last slide, no, it's not the last slide. It's just to give you an example of how this procedure could be implemented in practice. So we have this example of plastic straw. Obviously, that product can be seen as problematic because it's a single-use product, and there is a high likelihood for littering. So clearly fulfilling the problematic criteria. And then looking at the avoidability, clearly for this type of product, we can conclude that they can be avoided. We have some alternative like steel or bamboo straw, and we can also drink without straw. So therefore, we believe that this could be a perfect example that we can propose for listing in the treaty since the beginning. So the next slide, it's about the plastic and plastic product design. And before going to that slide, I would like to say that we don't want to limit our initial list of problematic plastic product to straw. We have other examples that we would like to list at the very beginning of the treaty. So now moving to the third pillar of what should be, in our view, in the plastic treaty. So the product design for plastic and plastic product. So we would like to include generic criteria in the treaty text itself. And this criteria could be linked to reducing the use of plastic, to minimize negative impact on human health and the environment. There is potentially a link, for example, to the chemical of concern, increase circularity by particularly related to durability, reusability, and reparability. And also linked to the minimization of emission and release, for example, of chemical of concern, but also of microplastic. We also push for, in Annex C, the development later on of very specific requirement for specific sectors via a dedicated program of work. And you can see I put two examples in the slide. So plastic bottles and clothing in polyester as a two examples that could be prioritized when the plastic treaty is adopted. So this is what we want to achieve. As I said, we still have only one negotiation committee in November. We had a meeting in Bangkok, an expert meeting with all delegation. And this meeting was quite positive. We saw a lot of openness, or more openness than before, toward the EU proposal from quite important countries like USA, China, and few others. There is still a block of member states that are against what we are proposing. But we'll see. Everyone was quite satisfied with that meeting in Bangkok. So perhaps it sets the scene for a positive outcome at the INC5. But the week will be extremely hard. So we hope that we will have the support of the scientific coalition and other scientific colleagues, because there are still a lot of things that are said by some party that are not at all scientifically correct. So we welcome sometimes the input to correct this kind of statement. So thanks a lot. It was fast, but yeah, I think almost on time.
Thank you so much, Sylvain.